Everyone is telling you you need to run a Performance Max campaign, but whatever you do, it's simply just wasting your money, and you can't pinpoint what's this exact reason why it's not working for you when everyone else is telling you you need to run it. So the problem is that you're listening to the wrong people. When you talk to a Google rep or another marketer, let's say, they usually will say, PMax is the king of the account. You need to have it. You need to set up a PMax right away because it's gonna, scale your account. But the reality is that in order for a PMax campaign to actually deliver you profit, you need to do a lot of things the right way before actually launching any PMax campaign. And nobody tells you that. This right here is the main reason why you get PMax wrong. So as you can see here, it's basically a conglomerate of a bunch of different placements that have their own mind. And when you try to make them all work together, things become a bit more complicated. On one hand, we have YouTube, we have display, we have search, we have discover, we have Gmail, we have maps. And what's even missing here, which is the most important part, is also the shopping placement. And when you have one campaign that has all these different placements running at the same time, you just see the outside outcome. So you group everything together, and unfortunately, it can't wear all these hats well enough at the same time, if that makes sense. It's not the best way to put it, but you need to approach it as a complex campaign, and you need to approach it step by step. So in order for a PMax to be successful, you need to have the right foundation in the ad account. With the right foundation, I mean you need to have these 3 campaigns running, and they need to be profitable and they need to be consistent. Because when you have these 3 campaign types converting well for you, then the chance of your PMax being successful and being able to scale your account by 3, 5, even 10x is way higher than if you would start a new account with just a PMax campaign. So as you can see here, the first campaign type that we want to have running consistently and profitably, and having it optimized, is a branded search campaign. I'm gonna link my whole tutorial on search campaigns somewhere on the screen, and you can check it out. But the reason why you want to have this running before launching a PMax is because PMax is gonna go after branded terms if you're not buying them up already with a regular search campaign. And the search campaign, especially if you're optimizing using a targeted impression share or maybe manual CPC strategy, is going to be a lot more efficient when it comes to going after branded search terms. And with efficient, I mean it's going to be a lot more profitable going after branded terms than a PMax would be if it went, after the branded terms. So always make sure to have a branded search campaign running on its own before touching a PMax campaign. The second campaign type I always like to have running profitably before touching a PMax campaign is a top of funnel search campaign. Again, I'm gonna link my search tutorial somewhere here. So the main reason why I want to have a top of funnel search campaign running, regardless if I'm gonna ever run a PMax or not, is because you go after very specific high intent search terms or potential customers that when they get inside of your funnel, they are a very valuable source of data on who to target later on. So, ideally you have the top of funnel search campaign running profitably, but if your ad account overall is profitable, I always recommend having a top of funnel search campaign running because it's simply going after that problem aware or even solution aware audience that's very, very important inside of your funnel to let Google know who your target customer is. Ideally, your top funnel search campaigns are profitable, but even if they're not, I always recommend having at least one top of funnel search campaign running. And last but not least, a standard shopping campaign. This is definitely a prerequisite to running a PMax campaign, because when you launch a PMax campaign with an unoptimized shopping feed, you will waste a lot of money. In order to avoid that, you should run a standard shopping before ever touching a PMax campaign. You want to use standard shopping mainly to optimize your listings. So with a standard shopping campaign, you see exactly which search terms you're showing up for, which means that you will be able to optimize your product headlines or descriptions in a way that's most efficient. If you would just, start a new PMax campaign without ever running a standard shopping campaign, you don't even know if you've optimized your product listings, and you'll be wasting a lot of your money. So standard shopping is essentially an opportunity for you to optimize your product listings, your headlines, your descriptions in a more cost-efficient way compared to a PMax campaign. And with a PMax campaign, you don't even know what you're appearing for with search terms, so you don't have that opportunity to tweak your listings. So always have a standard shopping running before launching a PMax campaign. Now you have the 3 campaigns running and you want to test out the performance max. No matter which ad platform I run ads on, what I always like to focus on is variable isolation. So the biggest variable we can isolate in this particular case with the PMax is the shopping feed. For that reason, I like to test a feed-only campaign as my first option. For the products, I like to use either the top 10 bestsellers, the top LTV products, or the highest margin products inside of one asset group. So ideally, I would only test one asset group with one of the 3. So top 10 bestsellers, top LTV products, or highest margin products grouped together, or even some other collection that, for example, I need to get rid of fast. So I would test just a PMax with just the feed, and the asset group would be one of these 3 product sets. That's always the first step, because in most cases I see this campaign type outperform a PMax with a feed and assets combined, and for that reason I like to start with this one because it's the lowest hanging fruit, and it's essentially like the old smart shopping campaign that Google got rid of. For that reason, I also like to call this campaign a skeleton PMax or just a smart shopping campaign, because it is exactly that. So how do you set it up? Let's go create a new campaign. So I always like to select create without the goals guidance, because then we have all the setting options available. If you select sales, it's not gonna improve your sales. You'll just have less options to choose from. So without a goal guidance, and then select PMax. Shopping would be the old standard shopping campaign type, and I select purchases for the conversion goal. Here I'm going to connect my Merchant Center account, because in this case we will connect the feed and we will need the Merchant Center connection to show the product feed as our shopping placement. So here I'll connect it, and then I'm going to click continue. In the next step, I have to select the bidding. So with the PMax, you have to go with smart bidding. I usually go with max conversion value because I'm in e-commerce. If this was like a lead gen campaign, I would go with maximize conversions, but with e-commerce, I go with maximize conversion value. Now, if you're more of a subscription long-term LTV based business where you just care about having a low front-end acquisition cost, then in that case, you might opt into conversions instead of conversion value. But if you're like 90% of e-com brands that just want to be profitable on the front and back end, and you don't have a static AOV, then I would recommend going after conversion value. I don't opt into this option because it's still not functional as it should be. So select your target destination, language, and then I would remove the automatically created assets. And then here, if you use third-party tracking, I would select this and add my triple whale weekly reports, Hyros, Nordbeam tracking code. And then here, if you want to exclude your brand, so this is also a good option. If you want to exclude the amount of branded terms you get on the PMax campaign, you can actually put it here, and then your ads will show less to the people that already know your brand, although that doesn't necessarily exclude other remarketing audiences. Now, this is basically the most important part. So you would give the asset group a name, and then you would select your listing groups. As said before, we would probably start with top 10 bestsellers in most cases. Now, if we're more after the LTV, then we would select a product set of top LTV products, or we eventually want to run a target ROAS because your margins vary a lot from SKU to SKU, then I would maybe do a group of highest margin and select them inside of the listing groups. So here I would go inside, and usually I would select them via item ID, and then I would select them all and then save here. Here you have to put in your final URL, and then here you don't want to add any assets, because if you add a headline, an image, a description, then it becomes it becomes the actual PMax. But as long as you don't include any assets inside of this section, then you're creating a skeleton PMax or a smart shopping. So just make sure when creating this campaign, do not add any assets here. Once that is done, you just publish the campaign. I mentioned this on a few videos, but I always prefer starting without the bid. So let's say the maximize conversion value option, because the target return on ad spend option usually works better once you already have a long-term campaign that's converting nicely. And I prefer adding the target return bid after I already have some data rather than straight in the beginning. What about the signals, you will ask? Well, honestly, I like to add some keywords that are relevant to what I'm selling. Ideally, I would check search term results from a Google search campaign and see what we converted for from there and add them here. You can also add, brand terms, because these keywords or search terms that you put here act as signals. It's not directly gonna target the keywords that we put inside. So for example, if I would put Nike, there's a high chance that this ad will predominantly show to a sports related audience, not specifically people looking for Nike. So even, men's sneakers, men's joggers, etc. So I would, put a bunch of search keywords here or search themes here. And you can also add, like, I usually test like Amazon.com. And you can put a bunch of search themes here. Here, I would also add your own data. So what I love doing here is uploading an email list and put it as a signal, because it's a very rich, it's very rich data, and I like to put it here as a signal. Again, it's not necessarily going to target that email list. It just acts as a signal to find people who are, relevant to who you want to target. And last but not least, you can use some of the predefined audiences that you get here, like website visitors, all converters, etc. I would just group a bunch of signals inside, and then I don't like to think about it that much anymore. And then once you publish this campaign, it's going to need a few days to start running. Now, this is the first campaign I would test. After you've tested this campaign, you will find out whether or not it's profitable. If it's profitable, you will probably, keep it running because it's making you money. And just keep in mind that Google is very slow. So when you launch a campaign, you have to make the mental decision that you're going to keep running this campaign without any interruptions for at least 3 to 4 weeks, because Google simply needs more time to optimize. If you launch a Google campaign, you have to be in it for the long haul. Now, let's say we launched our feed-only Performance Max campaign, and then we want to test the second option, which is assets only. So again, we had feed only, now we have assets only. So I would go with static images only, or static images in YouTube vids. So you can put up to 20 static images or up to 5 vids. Ideally, I would even prefer if I could select only 5 vids without the static images, which would push it to YouTube only. But unfortunately, you can't do that. So you have to select at least, one image to be able to even launch the asset group. But you can launch just the static images without the vids or the feed. To run an assets only campaign type, you shouldn't connect your merchant feed in the first step of creating the PMax campaign. If you remember, we selected the merchant feed. And also, if you're in lead gen, so if you want to generate leads, you kind of have to go with this option. It works really well. Now, people often ask me how many headlines, descriptions they should put inside of their PMax campaign. So I would say at least the bare minimum, because you need to add the bare minimum. Ideally, you take, again, search term results from your Google search campaigns that we've been running, all along, and see what you've converted from the actual search terms, and try to incorporate as many as possible in the headlines, descriptions, and long headlines and all that jazz. So this would be an asset only campaign. And then the last campaign type would be the feed plus assets. So this would essentially be your regular PMax campaign that has all of it inside. So why have I selected this as the last option? because what I like to do here is only the feeds that converted. So as mentioned, we can test these three to see which one performs the best, or like a collection, let's say specific. We know which feed converted the best, and we also know which assets converted the best in step 2. And then, if you already haven't scaled to where you want to be in step 1 and 2, you can also try out a feed plus assets campaign as the last step. You might ask me, why wouldn't you start with feed plus assets straight away? From my personal experience, usually these two converted better, and this one usually converted the best when I combined only winning feeds and assets instead of one campaign. And this approach allows me to really build up different assets inside of the account before jumping into a campaign that usually performs best when you already plug in things that convert well. With that being said, if you already start with step number 3, at least don't skip the 3 campaigns we said have to be the foundation to each Google Ads account for e-commerce. So the non-branded search campaign, the branded search campaign, and the standard shopping. You have to go through those before you launch a PMax. Just make sure to do that. And if you do the 3 campaigns properly, then you'll make a lot less mistakes when you actually launch a PMax campaign, because you've bought up the proper amount of branded search terms or impressions. The non-branded search terms are filling up your funnel with very high intent, problem aware and solution aware customers that you might retarget further down the line. And thanks to the standard shopping, you've optimized the headlines, the descriptions, and you've grouped together the right assets, and you've grouped together the right products inside of a product set. That's all for today. Hope you found value in my video. Make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions, simply write them down in the comment section and I'll make sure to answer them. Thank you, and until next time.